Hey everyone, welcome back.
Yeah, welcome back.
You're all here because just like us, you love to really get into, really complex ideas.
Absolutely.
But you don't want to get bogged down, with all the, little details.
Right.
You just want the core
The
insights.
gems.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
gems.
Yeah.
And you want them efficiently. You want to just get right to it.
Right. To the point.
So that's what we're all about here.
Absolutely.
So today we are going deep
Very deep.
into a really ancient source. The Vigyan Tantra.
The Vigyan Tantra. Yeah, this is a text that is roughly 5,000 years old.
Wow.
And it's presented as a conversation between Bhairav, representing the consciousness we know as Shiva, and Parvavi, representing his dynamic energy, Shakti.
So, imagine you're a fly on the wall
Yeah.
for this, incredible discussion.
There's a profound exchange
Yeah.
about, the very nature of existence.
Yeah. So, our goal in this deep dive is to really distill, the most crucial, important teachings from this incredible text.
Yes.
Especially its emphasis on self-realization, or Svayam Bodh,
Yeah.
which it says is achieved through understanding our own consciousness and learning to still the mind, all that mental chatter.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is that it doesn't rely on rituals, which is quite
Yeah.
interesting for such an old tradition.
Some different.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's also fascinating is that the Vidyan Bhairav, it doesn't really adhere to one specific doctrine or dogma.
Right.
It's more like a meeting point, a confluence of wisdom where truth is accepted wherever it resonates.
They like that.
Our source material describes it as this great ocean that feeds various streams of spiritual thought in India.
Oh.
It's a real treasure trove.
Love that treasure trove.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into it.
Let's dive in.
What does the Vigyan Bhairav tell us about the ultimate reality?
Yeah.
The reality behind everything.
Yeah. At its heart, it speaks of a supreme consciousness, often called paratattva,
Paratattva. Okay.
as the very ground of all being. Now, this isn't something you can fully grasp with your intellect.
Right?
It's something to be directly experienced.
Okay.
Think of paratattva not just as a ground, but as the potentiality for all grounds.
Okay.
The unmanifest source from which all manifestation springs.
Okay.
The text actually aligns with the Bhagavad Gita
Right.
by describing this reality as sat.
Sat.
Sat, being,
Oh.
rather than a sat, which is non-being.
So it is fundamentally real,
Yes.
but maybe our typical understanding of real doesn't really capture it.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
This ultimate reality appears as void or shunya, but it's not, a nihilistic emptiness.
Okay.
Right? It's described as being other than creation, yet simultaneously being the very cause of creation.
Oh, wow.
It's a paradox that really pushes us beyond our conventional ways of thinking.
So it's kind of both, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's beyond our typical kind of
Categories.
categories of thinking.
Dualistic thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's non-dual.
And this ultimate reality, this paratattva, is represented by Bhairava, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Bhairav is depicted as the one who supports, pervades, and ultimately withdraws the universe back into itself.
Wow.
The commentary highlights Bhairav as the giver of fearlessness.
Okay.
And even identifies him as Kala Bhairav, the very essence of time itself.
Time itself. Wow, that's a profound idea.
It is.
To connect to this ultimate reality.
Right. And Bhairav has this dual nature,
Right.
both terrifying and gentle.
So it's
You can think of it as the raw, untamed power of existence,
oh,
capable of both creation and destruction,
right.
but ultimately benevolent at its core.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we have this ultimate reality, this sort of dance between the terrifying and the gentle.
Yes.
And now the text delves into the interplay
Yeah.
between consciousness and energy.
Right.
So this is where Shiva and Shakti.
Come into play.
Yeah.
Exactly. So the tantric perspective, as presented in the Vigyan Bhairav, views the entire universe as a manifestation of Shiva's pure consciousness
Okay.
and Shakti's dynamic creative energy, often called vilas.
Vilas.
Yeah, so from the outset, the text is framing its wisdom through this dynamic interplay of pure consciousness, Shiva, and its inherent power, Shakti.
So they're not separate beings.
No.
But they're two aspects of the same thing.
Even more intimately connected.
Okay.
The text emphasizes that Shiva and Shakti are fundamentally inseparable aspects of the same underlying reality,
Okay.
a concept known as abheda.
Abheda. Meaning
Snan.
non-difference.
So, like, give us a relatable way to understand this. Like, what's a good analogy?
Think of fire and its ability to burn,
Okay.
or the sun and its light,
Yeah.
the moon and its moonlight.
Sugar and its sweetness.
Right.
You can't have one without the other.
Right.
They're inherent to the same thing.
Yeah.
Similarly, Shakti is the power through which Shiva manifests and creates.
Okay.
The commentary makes a very powerful point. Without Shakti, Shiva is merely Shava,
Chava.
corpse-like.
Oh, wow.
Shakti is the very means by which Shiva can be recognized.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it seems that Shakti plays a very active role in this dynamic.
Yeah.
Right.
While both are essential for creation, the text does emphasize Shakti as the primary active force,
Okay.
the energy through which the unmanifest consciousness becomes manifest in the universe.
Okay, so we have this ultimate reality
Right.
and this inseparable dance between consciousness and energy.
Yes.
Now, how do we as like individuals, fit into all of this?
Yeah, that's the key question, right?
Yeah.
So the text discusses the mind as both a source of limitation
Right.
and a potential pathway to liberation.
Okay.
And this is really crucial for you, the listener, because it directly relates to your own experience.
Right.
The Vigyan suggests that the entire world, as you perceive it, is actually conceived by your mind
Wow.
and its continuous flow of thought patterns.
So our reality is like a mental construction.
Precisely.
Wow.
Your perception of reality is shaped by the filter of your mind.
Right.
The world appears to you in accordance with your desires, your beliefs, and mental projections.
That's huge to think about.
It is.
So then, like, what's the real obstacle here? Is
Yeah.
it the world itself or is it something else?
The text is very clear on this. The mind, not the external world, is the true obstacle.
Okay.
With the stilling and eventual dissolution of the mind's habitual patterns,
Right.
the perceived limitations of the world also dissolve, leading to the realization of your true boundless nature.
And this is where the 112 methods come in.
Exactly.
Right.
The Vigyan outlines 112 distinct techniques,
Wow.
all aimed at helping you dissolve these ingrained mental tendencies and patterns.
112, that's a lot.
It is
So, like, where do we even begin
right.
to understand, the purpose of all of that?
A central insight and a recurring theme throughout many of these methods is the profound significance of the gap between two thoughts.
Okay.
This seemingly empty space.
Right.
The natural pause in your mental chatter
Mm-hmm.
is presented as a state of deep stillness,
Okay.
where the supreme consciousness can be directly experienced.
It's like still water reflecting the moon.
A perfect analogy.
Yeah.
When the surface of the mind is calm and still,
Right.
your true self, like the moon, can be clearly reflected.
Okay.
Reaching the state of shunya, or emptiness in consciousness,
Right.
reveals a very fundamental truth.
Okay.
That the ultimate cause of everything, the knower you and the known the universe, are ultimately the same unified reality.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned earlier the path of Anupaya,
Yes.
effortless realization.
Right?
And this might sound kind of paradoxical,
It does.
for the listener who might be used to, striving and effort and
Absolutely doing.
doing.
Very counterintuitive in a way.
So, yeah, talk about that a little bit.
So the concept of Anupaya, also known as Sahaj Yoga or spontaneous yoga,
Okay.
is indeed a core principle of the Vigyan approach to self-realization.
Okay.
It emphasizes a path of natural ease and allowing,
Right.
rather than forceful striving and manipulation.
So how does this contrast with like other spiritual practices that emphasize, discipline and rigorous effort?
Yeah, many traditional paths involve deliberate and often intense effort.
Right.
Anupaya suggests that such forceful exertion can inadvertently strengthen the ego,
Right.
the feeling of I am doing,
Right.
which the text identifies as a significant barrier to true knowledge.
Interesting.
It's a subtle but very crucial point.
So less active striving and more like a receptive allowing of what is.
Essentially,
Yeah.
Anupaya involves a natural quieting of the mind's activities,
Right.
a gentle letting go of the need to control without forceful suppression. It's about recognizing the inherent stillness that's already present beneath the surface of your constant mental activity.
Okay.
Yeah,
So with 112 methods, it's kind of like this vast landscape.
it is a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
So can we explore a few key practices
Yes, let's do that.
and insights from the text that might give our listeners, a more concrete sense of its practical application?
Absolutely. So let's touch upon a few that highlight the core principles of directly experiencing stillness and recognizing our unified nature.
Right.
which are threads that run through many of the 112 methods.
Okay.
We've already discussed focusing on the space between thoughts.
Right.
The commentary reinforces this as a fundamental technique for directly experiencing the stillness of consciousness.
Yeah.
It's about simply noticing those natural pauses that occur as one thought fades away and another arises.
So it's not about like forcing it or creating a gap. It's just noticing.
Yeah, noticing, becoming aware of the silence that's already there.
Right, exactly.
Another fascinating practice involves tracing the energy flow.
Okay.
The text speaks of subtle energy, or Shakti, moving in a cyclical pattern from the heart to 12 energy centers known as the Dwadashanta.
Dwadashanta, okay.
Which are considered, key energy hubs in the subtle body located in and around the head and then back to the heart.
Okay.
Focusing on the subtle movement can help dissolve your fixed mental constructs and lead to a deeper understanding of the energetic basis of your being.
That sounds like a very internal and subtle awareness.
It is.
To cultivate.
Yeah. Then there's the practice of experiencing the void.
Okay.
This involves consciously contemplating your 5 senses.
Right.
Sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. And their respective objects as ultimately being void or simply mental constructs by recognizing their impermanent and illusory nature.
Right.
You can gradually enter the supreme void or Parama Akasha.
Parama Akasha, okay.
The commentary even mentions Kabir.
Oh, really?
Who had this contrasting perception of the world.
Okay.
Highlighting how your internal state profoundly shapes your external experience.
So like what you see is based on how you are inside.
Yes.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
What about this idea of the unstruck sound?
Yeah, the Anahata Nada.
The Anahata Nada.
This is a profound idea.
Okay.
The Anahata Nada refers to a continuous internal sound
Okay.
that arises spontaneously without any external cause or collision.
So like you don't hear it with your ears?
No, it's internal.
Like an inner sound?
Yes. Those who delve deeply into meditation are said to perceive this subtle vibration.
Okay.
The text mentions its 10 different forms.
Wow.
And suggests that by focusing intently on this internal sound, you can eventually attain the supreme.
Okay.
Interestingly, the commentary even touches upon scientific interpretations that link this to subtle cosmic movements.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
That like inner and outers are connected in that way.
Right.
And of course, we can't talk about ancient Indian wisdom without mentioning Om or Pranava.
Right. How could we forget?
So how does the Vigyan Bhairav help us understand this?
Yeah, the text explains that Om is not merely a word,
Right.
but a fundamental vibration experienced in deep meditation.
Okay.
It represents Ishwara, the supreme being.
Okay.
Different forms of Om are mentioned, such as Omkar and Soham.
Uh-huh.
The practice involves meditating on its resonant quality
Right.
and the subsequent feeling of void that arises.
Okay.
It's about moving beyond the sound itself to the underlying silence from which it emanates.
Wow. So the sound points to the silence.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's also this idea of dissolving into desired objects.
Right.
Now, for the listener, who might have various desires,
Right, we all have them.
how does focusing on those desires lead to deeper realization?
Yeah, that's a good question.
It seems counterintuitive.
It does. The commentary explains that fixing the mind with unwavering concentration on a desired object can lead to a state of supreme bliss.
Okay.
It uses this analogy of a flame that remains steady and undisturbed in a windless place.
Okay.
The idea is that by fully immersing your attention in one point,
Right.
the scattered energy of the mind becomes unified,
Okay.
and you can experience a glimpse of the concentrated bliss that is your true nature.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Like when you're really into something.
Yes. Think about when you're completely absorbed in a hobby or something you love.
Right.
The outside world fades away.
Right. You lose track of time.
Exactly. It's a similar principle.
Yeah. And then you can kind of direct that inward.
Exactly.
Okay.
And another key insight is experiencing universal consciousness.
Okay.
The text, echoing both Vedantic and Tantric views,
Right.
emphasizes that the universe is permeated with consciousness.
Okay.
Sat Chidananda being consciousness bliss.
Right.
Meditating on this pervasive consciousness
Okay.
can lead to the profound realization that the world is not separate from it,
Okay.
but rather a manifestation of it.
So that's a big shift in how we think.
Huge shift.
Yeah. The text also highlights this connection between breath and consciousness
Yes.
through the practice of focusing on the union of prana and apana.
Right. Prana is the outgoing breath.
Right.
And apana is the incoming breath.
Right.
By concentrating on the point where these two movements meet within you,
Okay.
a state of sameness arises,
Okay.
leading to the realization of the underlying unity present throughout the entire universe.
So even something as simple as our breath can be like a doorway to
Yeah.
deeper understanding.
Absolutely. The Vigyan finds profound meaning in the most ordinary aspects of your experience.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then there's the concept of the illusion of Maya.
Right.
The text uses analogies like a magician's tricks
Right.
or a mirage to explain that the diverse forms of the world are impermanent and, in a sense, illusory.
Okay.
Maya,
All right.
true liberation comes from recognizing the underlying unchanging reality beneath this ever-shifting appearance.
So it's like seeing the movie screen
Yeah,
instead of getting caught up in the movie.
a very apt comparison.
Right.
Yeah.
And the text also talks about the nature of bliss,
Yes.
explaining that true and lasting bliss resides within you,
Right.
and it's not dependent on external objects
Right.
or fleeting sensory pleasures.
Correct. Even the memory of pleasurable experiences can
Yeah.
evoke joy,
Right.
pointing to this internal source of that feeling.
So happiness comes from within,
Ultimately, yes.
not from external things.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another crucial practice is witnessing thoughts without attachment.
Okay.
This involves observing your thoughts and emotions, both joy and sorrow,
Right.
without identifying with them.
Okay.
Recognizing the underlying consciousness that remains unaffected by these mental fluctuations.
So you're like a detached observer
Precisely.
of your own mind.
Yes, this detachment allows you to see the impermanent nature of your thoughts and emotions.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
The Vigyan Parav also emphasizes finding unity in diversity,
Okay.
highlighting the presence of the same underlying consciousness in all beings.
Okay.
From the seemingly inanimate to the animate,
Right.
the perception of separateness is attributed to ignorance.
That's a beautiful perspective.
It's a very unifying perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's the practice of neti-neti.
Meti.
Not this, not that.
Okay.
This is a process of negation
Okay.
where you systematically negate all limited attributes and descriptions in an attempt to understand the ultimate reality,
Right.
which is beyond definition by any single characteristic.
So it's like stripping away all the labels
Exactly.
and seeing what's left.
Yeah, what remains.
Yeah.
And ultimately, the text speaks of realizing, I am Shiva.
Wow.
This powerful affirmation of your inherent identity with the ultimate consciousness
Right.
is presented as a direct path to liberation.
Okay.
It's not about ego inflation,
Right.
but about recognizing your true divine nature.
And that can be very transformative.
It can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the text also underscores the importance of a true guru. It cautions that while these teachings are invaluable, true knowledge requires the grace of Ishwara and the guidance of a realized teacher.
Okay.
Books alone can sometimes be misleading.
Right. So you need a teacher.
It's helpful to have a teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's something that you see in a lot of traditions.
absolutely. It's a recurring theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, the Vijayanamparav stresses the necessity of discernment,
Yes.
warning against sharing this profound knowledge with those who are unqualified or may misuse it.
Yes. The commentary suggests that offering such advanced teachings to those who aren't ready can even be detrimental.
So it's like precious and you have to be careful.
You have to be careful with it.
Yeah. So the core of all these practices really comes down to
Stilling the mind.
tilling the mind.
And recognizing this fundamental unity of consciousness.
Yes.
The commentary reiterates that the central practice involves quieting the mental chatter
Right.
and recognizing the fundamental oneness that pervades all of existence. And it also notes that even while engaged in everyday activities,
Right.
someone who has mastered these practices can attain extraordinary abilities.
Oh, wow.
Through mere intention, but true and lasting liberation lies in continuous absorption in samadhi or union with the divine.
And true worship, according to the Vigyan Bhairav, it's not about external rituals
No.
or offerings.
That's right. The text explains that true worship is not about elaborate external ceremonies,
Right.
but about establishing unwavering faith in the formless Pyrav and merging your being with that ultimate reality.
Okay.
Lasting fulfillment or trapti comes not from the acquisition of worldly objects,
Right.
but from reaching this non-dual state through the consistent practice of these methods.
Okay. The commentary also talks about the inner sacrifice or homa.
Right.
And this isn't a literal fire ritual, right?
No, the Vigyan Pyrav interprets Homa as the act of offering the five elements, your senses, their objects of perception, and even your mind itself into the fire of consciousness. This inner sacrifice leads to the realization of the self, the braining away of all that is not your true nature.
Okay, so what about someone who has actually attained this liberation?
Yeah.
How would you describe a liberated being?
Such a person is described as having realized the fundamental oneness of existence.
Okay.
For them, the distinctions between the worshiper, the worshipped, and the objects of worship completely dissolve.
Okay.
There is no longer a sense of separation between themselves and the rest of reality.
Wow.
Yeah.
Finally, the commentary briefly mentions the cycle of breath and consciousness and the inherent mantra Hamsa. Can you elaborate on that connection?
Yes. The text connects the natural flow of your breath, prana moving outward and apana moving inward, with the very essence of life, or jiva.
Great.
It points out that with each breath you take, there's an inherent subtle mantra being repeated.
Okay.
Ham with the outgoing breath and sa with the incoming breath,
Right.
naturally forming hamsa. This natural mantra is constantly present. And focusing your awareness on it can be another direct way to connect with the underlying consciousness.
So this has been a really incredible exploration into the Vigyan Tantra.
Yeah.
What would you say is like the core message for our listener?
The Vigyan offers a very profound understanding of reality as a unified field of consciousness.
Right.
More importantly, it provides this rich collection of practical methods,
Right.
these 112 dharanas,
Yeah.
for you to directly transcend the limitations of your mind
Right.
and experience your true unified nature.
Right.
It emphasizes effortless awareness
Right.
and recognizing the inherent divinity that resides within you.
And it's amazing how this ancient wisdom is still so relevant today,
It is.
in our modern world.
Yeah, it reminds us that the answers we seek may not lie in external pursuits,
Right.
but rather in turning our attention inward
Right.
and recognizing the stillness and fundamental unity that is always present.
We encourage you, our listener, to just take a moment
Yeah.
and reflect on these ideas.
Yeah.
Maybe starting with the practice of observing those natural pauses between your thoughts.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah, see what unfolds.
Yeah.
When you just become aware of that silence that underlies all the mental activity.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this deep dive into the Vigyan
Yeah.
really leaves us with a very compelling question.
It does.
Could this feeling of separation that we experience
Right.
so often be just a mental habit?
A deeply ingrained mental habit.
Yeah, and if so,
What extraordinary possibilities might open up
yeah,
if you begin to truly perceive the interconnectedness that this ancient text so powerfully emphasizes?
that's a good question
It is.
to reflect on.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.